Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to show you the top 10 most essential Ark creatures to me. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. In at number 10 we have got the Mantis, and the reason why I like this creature and I find it is an essential sort of necessity to me is that it is such a great gatherer of all kinds of resources, because it can wield any kind of melee weapon, not including tech ones. That would be way too OP if it could. But, you know, I don't really mind too much. It can wield swords, pikes, sickles, hatchets, pickaxes. Like, you can gather loads of metal with this thing, loads of wood, loads of thatch, loads of fiber, loads of meat, loads of hide. Essentially, the options are almost endless. They're only limited to basically all of the main resources in the game, which you can gather with just generic melee tools. Obviously, this thing can't gather berries, but, you know, you have the herbivores for that, and it's not too much of an issue anyway. Something like a parasaur or a stego or a trike will really net you some great berry gain in the early game, and actually one of those creatures is on the list today. Next up, we have got the Allosaurus, and I kind of find this as a bit of a necessity along with the Carnotaurus as well. I really like that creature as well, probably more so the Carno, but the reason why I'm putting this here instead of the Carno is because of public opinion. And my very strong opinions of the Carnos do not translate the best to my audience. So this is why I'm putting the Allo here. I'm listening to you. And I do definitely agree that the Allo is a great creature, and it will really net you through loads of bosses. A Rex will be great as well. Although I wouldn't say that is a necessity nowadays. It's just, you know, a generally good creature to have, which, you know, you'll probably want to use a lot for just general bosses. And you can have Gigas and Carcharodonsauruses as well, which some might say is a necessity for extinction, but just on a general Ark whole, you don't really need those creatures too much. You only really need them for that map, so that's why they're not on the list, if you were wondering later in the video why they're not appearing. Also, this is kind of a bit of my personal opinion as well, but, you know, feel free to disagree with this list as well. But personally, I do think the Allo is a really great, pretty much essential creature. Deals the bleed ability. They come in packs. You can get so much damage dealt with these things, and especially if you have a pack of 3, actually, you're just going to be dealing so much damage to things. Really easy to tame, especially on ASA, because of that baby mechanic, and they're just in every version of Ark, and like everyone just has access to them. So definitely go ahead with the Allosaurus if you have never tamed one before. Next up, we have got the Bionics, and this creature for me is essential for doing any kind of caving. You could use the Shadowmane as well, but I'm sticking to my roots here with the Bionics, and I think this is a truly essential creature for caving, like I've just said. This creature really is the perfect size for doing caves, which is why it is such a great caving creature. You can fit in to pretty much any cave apart from the artifact of the Skylords, but you can't really get anything in there apart from maybe a dung beetle. But what's a dung beetle going to do fighting in the caves for you? Not really anything, and the artifact of the Skylord cave isn't actually too bad anyway. And yeah, that's actually one of the easier ones, I would say, on the island. Actually, what are your opinions on caves? I always don't really like the Cave of the Massive on the islands, because the lava just kind of scares me a bit, and I always bring grappling hooks. I always over-prepare for that one, and then sometimes after I've done it loads, I'm like, oh, that's easy, and then I just die. Yeah, that cave has always been a roller coaster of emotions for me. Also, the Bionics deals quite a heavy amount of melee damage. Its health is pretty decent as well. Its stamina and speed will keep it going through caves, and it can even stun creatures up to the size of a Megalodon under the water using right click on your mouse. So it is actually a pretty good underwater caving dino too. Next up, we have got the Desmodus, and this creature kind of is now just an essential part of my Ark life, along with the Maywing as well, although I've been using this thing more, so that's why it's here instead. If you are a Maywing lover though, I have not forgotten about you, and you can have a brief mention here. That's your mention. Sorry, I know it's a little bit puny, but we are here to talk about the Desmodus after all. This thing has Sanguine Elixir, absolute cheat for tames, and as a PvE player, that really does just generally help me out. Yes, taming hasn't been too much of an issue for me, but it just speeds up the process even more, and the ability to farm blood bags is really useful for the next creature on the list, which I personally think is like really essential, and I love that creature to death. And this essentially just allows me to tame more of those, so I am very thankful for Desmodus. And also, these things can go invisible in the nighttime as well, but because I was in the Wastelands biome on extinction, I can't show you that because it's never nighttime. And for some reason, when I'm recording B-roll and then I keep exiting and entering the game, going through full screen and not full screen, sometimes things in the game will glitch, and it kind of glitched there a little bit. And if you couldn't tell already, next up we have got the Bloodstalker. This creature had to make it into the list for me, as in my opinion, it is the best underwater creature no questions asked, and you're probably going to need to spend some time underwater in Ark. Obviously, you're not going to use these things for defeating the Moda on Genesis Part 1. That's the only really underwater thing that these things can't do, but any kind of underwater caving or underwater exploration, these things will do perfectly, and you can kill quite a lot of things underwater as well, although you might want some of the bigger, beefier underwater creatures to deal more of that damage and just generally get more of that done, because, you know, the Bloodstalker isn't going to be able to do absolutely everything for it, so, you know, you always have to be aware of all of that. But personally, just for any kind of underwater travel, underwater looting, this creature really does just work for me. It has so much agility. You can see if creatures are aggroed onto you or not, which is really useful. These things also can just speed away from any kind of predators really quickly. They can glide across the top of the water as well if you're just trying to get across the ocean instead of just actually go in it. But even if you are in it, they are just so agile and so mobile, and when you're out of the water, they're still a really great agile mobile creature as well, which can't really be said for most other underwater creatures, as they'll just die or they don't even really come out of the water anyway. But you definitely can kill some underwater creatures by doing some mildly sketchy bugs and then clipping them out of the water. That has definitely happened to me a few times. Next up, we have got the Deinonychus, and I really do think that this creature deserves to be on the list for the essential Ark creatures, as it's just so powerful for defeating any kind of bosses, and it's extremely mobile as well, and ridiculously easy to tame. This is like basically the perfect ideal carnivore for me, and although some of you may say that these are a little fragile, they really aren't, and you can get so much use out of them because they deal so much damage. They're barely even going to take damage from the opponents, as they're not even really going to have any time to even think of attacking you. And yes, maybe they don't have the largest health pool in the game. You can still level up that health as much as you want, really, and obviously you can get some health mutations when breeding and get some even better Deinonychuses out of it, and obviously tame some high level ones as well, get some high level eggs and then raise those and then breed those together and do that, and then you're going to have such a successful time. And with the pack buff and all the buffs they have, you really should not have an issue with it. Also, talking about these things, mobility, they go at absolute ripping speeds, and they also do take no fall damage whatsoever, which does play quite a huge benefit towards them. Also, they can kind of parkour around the map as well, which is a really nice, neat ability for them to have. Obviously not quite as elegant as the Thyla solution, but still, they can really get around the map with absolute ease. Next up, we have got the Stegosaurus, and on the island and pretty much any map, this is just my go-to berry gatherer. But as we kind of go closer to the number one spot, it's going to hone in more on the more essential creatures for the island, as most people do of the island. So I'm going to just kind of hone in on that more, and from here on, actually, there are no creatures which are not on the island. Obviously, previously we've had Bloodstalkers and all of that. Yes, very essential creatures to me, but also just for Ark and for things like the island, maybe not so much because they don't even spawn on those maps. But obviously you can tell what this Stego is going to do. This thing is just such an insane berry gatherer and can also ward you against Microraptors, so they can't do anything to you now, which is good. Didn't really expect that, but it's probably just to do with some rider protection. They're also really great for PvP tanking as well, and just for general tanking of damage in the game. You could even probably do some bosses with Stegos. Probably wouldn't recommend it, but you can definitely do some of them with it, maybe on Gamma. I don't really know why you would want to, because there's some other creatures. Bit of an unnecessary point, but I guess I challenge one of you out there to do all the bosses on the island with Stegos. That would actually possibly make a really good YouTube video, but do I have the time and commitment to do that? Definitely not. Next up, in at the number 3 spot, we have got the Pteranodon, and isn't your first flight and just general early flying around a really essential part to your Ark game? Probably, and this really does assist you with it, and especially on maps like the island, your progress is going to absolutely skyrocket when taming one of these creatures. And also for PvP use as well, they are very good on that front as well, as they can be used to do some raids in the early stages of the game. For those lower level bases, you just go in and you just spam that spin attack and just absolutely wipe everything out within that base. Definitely works. Obviously, don't bring it to the alphas of the server with their tech base, that's not really going to work, but for those lower level early raids, they will definitely benefit you quite largely, and they do have some pretty decent speed as well, especially considering an ASA on servers now, and actually just for a while you can't level speed on flyers. Obviously that used to be a thing, a bit of an unnecessary point, but on single player I've always had that on, and people did think that you weren't actually you wouldn't actually be able to do fly. Well, no, it was character speed leveling, wasn't it? That was a new thing. Probably what I was thinking of. But you still can do that in ASA. Either way, obviously, you are limited by the original flyer's speed, and this thing can travel at some quite hefty speeds compared to some of the other flyers on the map. Also, it's a very simple tame as well. Just whack out a bowler and a club, or you can use some trank arrows just to be on the safe side. I would actually probably do that. Get like 10 trank arrows and find the highest level Pteranodon that you can, probably over level 100 considering how bad their weight and stamina are. If you go for one under that, and then bowler it and a couple of tranks and it'll be out, and then give it just some normal meat, or if you can shell out for it, prime, and if there is an ovis in the area, please God, feed that thing some mutton. Next up, in at number 2 spot, we have got the Thyla, and this is kind of one of those creatures where it's just very essential for me for land travel on the island. I want to tame a Thyla. I can get through the game so much easier, especially on maps like the island. Again, we are focusing on the island a lot more as we hone in further on the list. Like I said earlier, just to mention, it's not like I'm just completely dissing out other creatures because I don't think they're essential. I'm changing the kind of trajectory of what maps these things are essential on. And obviously you could bring creatures over from like Arboration and Extinction and all of that, and they'd be really great on maps like the islands. But still, you know, not everyone does have access to that, and I do need to be aware of general Ark accessibility, as obviously DLCs aren't free, at least not all of them. And you know, I hope your understanding is that. I don't really know why I need to repeat this so much, but there's always the comment out there that's just like, oh yeah, you missed this, and it's like, yeah, maybe I did, but for me it's not. Sometimes I do get caught out though, and I do appreciate that. Either way, obviously Thyla, really fast travel mount that can climb any kind of wall, vertical surface, makes it quite a good PvP creature as well. This thing also does deal bleed damage, which definitely plays a huge part into this being a great creature for just general, like, what was I even talking about? General PvE use, general combat use, to do with that bleed ability, of course. Not sure if it had it at release, but it definitely does now, and it really does benefit this thing. And its mobility is insane, if I haven't said that already. These things can jump everywhere, and they can really get things done. And at number 1, we have got the Argentavis, and this creature is the epitome of metal gathering. I guess I'm also kind of going to put the Anki in this spot as well, as once they're put together, you just have yourself the gathering kings of the map. These creatures also are maybe not the fastest, but they do have a lot of weight and stamina, so they can fly over long distances with absolute ease, and unlike the Pteranodon, they don't have to take breaks every couple of seconds. I always find that with those creatures. It just annoys me so much. And with the RG, you don't have any of that whatsoever. You just have the ease of flying, although yes, at a slower speed, and obviously you don't have that spin attack for the PvP raids. For me, these things are still more essential though, as they have weight reduction on things like metal, crystal and obsidian. Pretty sure it's 50% as well, which is quite hefty, and you can just gather so much metal. And obviously they're a really great flyer. Their saddle also acts as a portable smithy, so if any of your metal gear or metal tools break on a mission of some sort, then you can just quickly repair them. Easily done like that, no problems whatsoever. And also these things do have some nice regen buffs when you actually like go into a fight and you kill something. Then when you eat that dead corpse, you are going to get the regen buff, which is a really nice bonus.
Now, of course, we must shout out our patrons, Ekaterina Pechkova and Karina Thorne, who are our paid Patreon members at the moment. Thank you for all your support. I really appreciate everyone on this list. Everyone else is, of course, free members. Thanks for the support, though.